Hello, everybody. Welcome to a Common Sense reading. Uh, this afternoon, I'm excited to welcome our two readers, Suzanne FRISCHKORN and Nathan Hoks. For anyone who's attending the reading for the first time, my name is Jordan Stempelman. I started this series in Kansas City, Missouri in 2011. And since the pandemic, I host these readings in person in the fall and then remote in the spring. And this will be the final reading for this spring. So if you're interested in being on the mailing list for the fall and for the spring of 26, you can find me either on Instagram or you can find me on Facebook. There's a Common Sense page there. I've also archived all of the past remote readings on my website. There's some great ones on there. Let me go ahead and put the link into the chat. So there's a link to my website. Um, Following the reading today, there'll be a brief Q&A with the poets. So you can post any questions you might have for today's readers in the chat, and I will be sure to ask them on your behalf. And then also, writers, if you have any questions for one another, that's enthusiastically welcomed as well. So our first reader, Suzanne FRISCHKORN, is the author of 4 poetry books, most recently Whipsaw from Anhinga Press and Fixed Star from JackLeg Press, as well as 5 chapbooks. She's the recipient of the Writers Center Emerging Writers Fellowship for her book Lit Windowpane, the Aldrich Poetry Award for her chapbook Spring Tide, selected by Mary Oliver, a Connecticut Individual Artist Fellowship, and a SWWIM Residency Award at the Betsy. Her poems have recently appeared in Denver Quarterly, North American Review, Salamander, South Dakota Review, and Latino Poetry, a Library of America Anthology. She's an editor at Poetry is Currency, an assistant poetry editor for Terrain.org, and also serves on Terrain's editorial board. Please welcome Suzanne FRISCHKORN.
Thank you so much, Jordan. Thanks for everybody for coming out for poetry today on this Saturday afternoon. And it's my honor to be reading with Nathan Hawks today. And I am going to be reading from my book, Whipsaw, which is almost a year old. I think its birthday month is this year. The first poem I'm going to read to you is a little speculative narrative. It was inspired by Alice Notley's The Descent of a Let, and it's called The Origin of My Hard Times in Idaho. One day, I awoke under fluorescent light and in a dental chair. This is not a fairy tale. The drill whines. The dentist asks me questions as he drills my tooth, and it's complicated. Manners, the urge to be good. I don't know if the man who came to our home and pulled out my baby tooth with a pair of pliers was a dentist. What I do know is that it was always like that in our house. When I worked the toothbrush with a pea-sized dab of toothpaste into my child's mouth, I wonder why my mother never asked if I brushed my teeth, or why she had me sleep on a pile of coats in the coat check room. These nicks, paper cuts of memory, stitch a path, a map, a route shorter as the crow flies. Crow guides me. He sits on my shoulder, caws in my ear. Crow is relentless, relentless crow. Crow cocks his head and looks at me with his onyx eye, winks me back to Hard Times, Idaho, and the 3 homes. The first, a capitalist dream, new wall-to-wall carpet, 4 bedrooms, no basement, a yard full of mud. The second features a porch with a life-size statue of the Sacred Heart of Jesus. Here, a visitation from a grandfather, one dark night, projected on the closet door. The third, a house aflame. White clouds dab the blue sky while we sit by the rope swing and watch it burn. The long grasses sway with wind. Wild raspberries stain my palms. Violence, wounds, guns, a runaway. Every ending, a new beginning. Home is a candlestick, a basket, a black iron fence, a braid. Oh, Idaho, of glassy lakes, mountains, and open space. An abandoned mini golf course, a row of cottages for rent, a yellow parka, a long black snake in the driveway, an empty gift shop, yellow house, white house, burnt house. Crow looks and looks. Crow enjoys this. Because below I am the daughter used to shield the mother, and above I am the mother who shields her daughter. I am the shield, silver and polished to high shine. I glint in moonlight. I glint in sunlight. I track crows for miles. Crow brings me trinkets, a bit of foil, a fragment of bird nest, a sprig of pine, a shoelace. We take the path down to the mothers, also known as the three brujas. Swaths of residual spellbindings line it like a bassinet. Here, a newel post marker. There, a crime scene photo. A library lamp lights the shadows. We fall like snowflakes. Worn paint on a red barn. Broken window pane. A sapling grows in a rain gutter. Get dressed. We're going hunting. Crow shakes out his feathers. The rain spout pours out rain. I brush my hand on the trunk of a loblolly pine. We descend to cross the stone arch. I twist the silver ring on my finger. A floor lamp lights the dark corners. The first two witches, Mary and Mercedes. The stallions snort when we say their names. Did you see the foxtail caught in the periphery? Mary, daughter of Anastasia, maid at the de los Cisneros household, raped by its colonizer's son, begat my mother. Mercedes was by all accounts a mean witch, a badass witch who scattered her children to the four winds and never looked back. That witch begat my father. Is it any wonder that my father married my mother? Crow caws. He caws and caws and caws. A root wraps my ankle. Oh, gnarl, oh, trunk knot, oh, oh, oh. Rasa, free me. Gallop fierce and fast, speed into the underground forest, victor of memory, briar and thorn. Every day I wait for you. The third witch pushed me from her breast. I sprouted from drops of milk that fell to earth. Lily, when shall we meet again? In the thunder, lightning, or the pouring rain? Crow circles the fog. January's sun like the moon. She was a beauty, malignant inside. Something went awry, full of scorpions in her mind. Lily, what are you seeking? I seek the path out of darkness. Lily, what are you willing to abandon? The hole in the chain link fence without a gate, the fleet of school buses lined up like number two pencils. For the darkness is too familiar. Oh, for a bright moon. Racked is a journey without end, gagged and bound by memory. Enchant me, take it from my heart. The entrance of the sewer tunnel is a wide concrete mouth and harbors a trickle of water to lead us through the dark. Crow, a boy of 14 with night black hair, holds my hand when the passage narrows. We squeeze through the rough crevices. We stoop, we crawl. We walk the tunnel in the darkest of darkness. After some time, we reach the exit. The sun blinds us, and Crow is quiet. We take in the headstones, the loved and the unloved. Not once did we spy a caretaker during the eon we stood on the threshold. Before I step out of the tunnel, Crow reminds me, I work a silver coin from my mouth. I pull a silver coin from my shoe, another from my pocket. Crow plucks the last coin from behind my ear. Each silver coin dropped in the offering box with no candle to light, not a branch cracked. Our footsteps left no echo. I was unchained in a dry bathtub. And here is the truth. I've never been to Idaho. I couldn't wait to get out of that town. Half light. The first bright of the sun of the year, and I'm unable to face it. Sunlight glitters in gutter streams and thin snowbanks, just enough to reveal their entrails, decayed leaves, blackened branches. By afternoon, the sun is unable to break through the clouds. As we leave to pick up my son, my daughter catches snowflakes on her tongue. In the backyard, a woodpecker coaxes a beetle out of the pine bark. Sometimes no amount of burrowing will suffice. February, the month where giving into dormancy is most seductive. It feels farthest from spring. I remind myself the earthworms are busy aerating the soil and that dormancy is a form of conservation. I remind myself to pick up my son, to go to the bank, the post office, the market. These small trips, daily and ordinary, get me through the longest month. The afternoon's hush, interrupted by snowplow and small children running through the house, fills in the night. I wake before dawn to find our neighborhood buffed in silence, its hard edges softened. With sunrise comes the rhythmic scrape of shovels against pavement. The snow appears brighter in the half light. The wind tosses up sparkling motes. This next poem I'm going to read, I wrote when I was living in Redding, Connecticut. Keith Richards, his Connecticut state was about 15 minutes from where I lived in Redding, Connecticut. He lived in Weston. And we did not live on an estate. We lived in an old converted cow barn, but we shared a forest. And I wrote this book in response to his autobiography called Life. I wrote this poem actually in response to him. So it's called Keith Richards, I Was With You. I was with you, Keith Richards, even when you rhapsodized about those sweet honeys who fed you and warmed you on the road with their soft bodies. Those were different times, and I forgive you. Keith Richards, I believe you about Mick Jagger. Frontmen always get ahead of themselves. Keith Richards, I too only ingested high quality pharmaceutical grade Coke and wouldn't touch what passes for euphoria on the streets today. Keith Richards, I was with you like a friend as you presented the best version of Keith. May I call you Keith? I was with you all the way until you opened your garden gate and stepped into my primeval forest, that happy hunting ground of the Iroquois, that old Indian burial ground turned nature preserve, backing up to your house. I was with you, Keith Richards, and the deep lake and the waterfall. Keith Richards, I stood apart from you when you and George decided to catch fish named Oscars, so big and so tasty. I was off to the side when instead you caught the mythical snapping turtle, often spoken of, seldom seen. Green and slimy, it lumbers out of the lake with your fish, a prehistoric creature, its mouth about to pop and snap. You drop your rod, Pick up a rock and crack the turtle on its shell. It sinks into the lake, immense, ancient, last seen by the Iroquois. And that is where I left you, Keith Richards. The last poem I'm going to read from Whipsaw today, I wrote right after the 2020, around the time of the spring 2020 protests against systemic racism. It's called Home Ground. This bird call would be mistaken for a fading bottle rocket, and the peepers will sing their Greek chorus. There is a lot to be said for the preserve. It has a little more than a little of a lot of good things. Water, of course, ripples. This is how in geography the low takes the high. Do you remember the morning after the ice storm? How the wind through the branches sounded like the parting of bead curtains? June now, and all over America, helicopter blades cut through birdsong. And I thought I would read some new poems for a change. Try them out on you if you like them. First one's called Flight. The first time I left you, I loaded everything I owned into my blue Sunbird and flew to the other side of town to book a room at a highway motel. 5 months pregnant with a brown-eyed boy who began to flutter whenever I sat down. If only I had a crystal ball to show me what the waves of adrenaline my body sent to his body would do to his body. Would it have changed anything? I didn't leave you again for a long time. It took a magic potion, a teapot filled with cash, a suitcase of bank statements, and love for a brown-eyed boy for me to catch flight. We bypassed the church and the rider on the white stallion. I was so thin then, effaced by your brutalization. Years later, I plant daffodils and tulip bulbs in a patchy yard surrounded by despair. Only then do I discover I'm an optimist. Wind chill factor. Preoccupied with visibility, I dream of clouds. I Google, where is the gloomiest city in America? How far must you drive to see blue sky? As a child, I mastered invisibility to survive. As I grew, I aced AP Wayward Girl, earned my master's in Run for Your Life. I've never tasted a white apple or sucked on a stone. Taste, like love, is subjective. Art speaks to you or it doesn't. You can lean in doorways all week. It doesn't make you a cubist, just skewed with a tender back. Cumulus clouds stun the blue winter sky. I've been running too long. And just these are the last few. Chronology. The investigation is ongoing. A single chair, a suspended television, a thriving orchid set on the deep windowsill, a tiny spit sink to rinse your mouth. What are you looking for? Epiphany? I don't know. I don't know what to do with this life. I dreamt again of the black horse at sunrise. Its rider carried a sickle. He tore a gash in the cosmos. The last poem's called When I Managed to Sleep Past 3 a.m., and it's one of those run-in titles. When I manage to sleep past 3 a.m., you may be sure my husband's alarm wakes me. We spoke of time this week. Is time a concept, construct, illusion? Yesterday, I changed my pants twisted my knee, and began to limp. No longer the girl from the past who leapt stones to cross a brook. Where did she go? I used to push my children in a tandem stroller 3 miles every day. Fresh air turned their cheeks rosy, knocked them out. I was prolific then. If time is an illusion, wouldn't that mean I'm prolific now? Prolific as infant, taking the world in with each wail, memorizing details. These days, I'm tender, like the soft skin of worms when they wriggle from soil after weeks of rain. Thank you so much.
That was wonderful, Suzanne. That was great. Um, Students in my long poem class were actually reading Eliot's Four Quartets. So at the end there, I felt like it was coming back to that. That was beautiful. It was beautiful. Um, our second and final reader is Nathan Hoks, whose most recent book of poems is Nests in Air, which came out from Black Ocean. His fourth book, Moony Days of Being, is forthcoming in 2026, also from Black Ocean. He teaches poetry at the University of Chicago and at the School of the Art Institute in Chicago. And that's where he lives, not at those schools, but in Chicago with his family. Please welcome Nathan Hoks.
Hello, thank you for having me, Jordan. It's a pleasure to read with you, Suzanne. Those poems were killer, fantastic. Yeah, I'm zooming to you from my basement. I'm not hiding in my campus office. I swear. Um, I have some videos I'm just gonna play while I'm reading. A lot of my books have pictures in them, or two of my three books have pictures of them, and I think my fourth one is going to as well. And the pictures kind of, you know, just break up uh the poems a little bit. And I thought I'd take advantage of the Zoom technology and play some videos. Anyways, I've, been looking at my face my whole life, and I wanted to spare you all. Um, so I thought I'd read a protest. There was a protest in Chicago this morning, and I felt really guilty because everyone was asking me if I was going, and I couldn't go because I had a um, family commitment. But I'll start with a poem called "Protest Poem with Berries." This is in the forthcoming book. I protest stupidity, but I am myself stupidity. Gunfights erupt in the film version of this identity crisis, whereas the novel is heavy with whispers and a subplot regarding the giraffe that broke out of the zoo, which was a front for the stupid fascists. A fork-tongued general's lips turn blue. Why did he have to drive the country to ruin? Why didn't the burning mountain swallow him when it had the chance? I would poison him with blackberries and jab a chopstick in his dead eyeballs until they curl the way paper curls up on itself, the way this poem protests itself with valiant and unmistakable stupidity, stupidity of gravel and sand and metaphor, until the poem explodes and showers the elaborate floral arrangements in bits of cantaloupe left over from last night's mixer. Okay, next. This is a this is a poem about oobleck. Um, and if you don't know what oobleck is, go make some. It's really easy to make. It's this thing called a non-Newtonian substance, and it based on how you apply pressure to it, it will act either like a solid or like a liquid. It's a very strange thing. And you can Google it and find a recipe. It's just like cornstarch and water, basically. All right. The poem is called Pressure Dependent Substance. If you punch a blob of oobleck, the starch grains lock into position and the mixture will resist you. But if you ease your fingers into it, the cornstarch acts like water and the particles let you pass through, embracing your hand in goop. And so to pass through this poem, please don't bash your head into the paper looking for the meaning, but instead run your eyes lightly over the text. Rub the brain against the words as if giving them a massage so they soften and absorb the neurons, which now open out like ferns. And when there is such frond-shaped shade in the gray matter, you sync up with a voice, a sound, a tune, or low rumbling tone that was there all along, like a ventilator, and thanks to it, you can breathe. This poem is called Surveillance. When I grow up, I want to be the owl that lives behind the Taco Bell, which you visit each Saturday around noon when the sun is not too hot and the pink mylar balloons are fastened to the gate. I want to perch where I can watch the joy in each driver's face as they proceed along the drive-through, and I want to see you sipping a Pepsi through a straw there at the beige table by the window as you listen to the three voices, the turbo engine, the steam engine, and the clunky engine of earthwork that towers over the stream where nothing lives except a noxious fraternity of odors, the rich stink of the sun, that belligerent eyeball in the front office that frog marches us along a day's dish clank nonce. So let's escape. Let's follow that dunce butterfly back to my perch behind the Taco Bell. Please look up. Please save me. So this poem um, is it's called Hoodoos, and it's I took a trip to Utah with family a couple years ago, and we visited the Hoodoos in Bryce Canyon, and I was really struck by the landscape. And it's a villanelle, surprisingly. I'm terrible at forms, but I don't know. We'll see how this one lands. Villanelles are these forms where the first line and the third line of the first stanza repeat throughout the poem in alternating order. So you'll hear like an echo. Um, I kind of play fast and loose with the exact phrasing, but it's the idea is that they repeat. Um, and traditionally there's a rhyme scheme in them. I don't think I managed that. Sort of, kind of, not really. Yeah. Okay. So hoodoos. National Park Service, RIP. Okay, here we go. Okay, hoodoos. I don't have to ask the ghosts what I already know. They are the sky's broken tourniquets. The cloud is blood, the mesa is bone. Me too, I'm stretched, unshaped, alone. Elated, I coil in curls of smoke, so hey, I don't have to ask the ghosts what I already know. The ice breaks apart the men of stone. But I just want to hang out in the park to watch the cloud bleed over the mass of bones. Then I'll take a nap in the brick house that sits on the blue hill with nettle. I won't ask the ghosts. They know, I already know, it's all wind on silt. And as I sink into the gloom, hot marshmallows drip off sticks. Red clouds dangle above the mesa of bone. In a dream, I see three fingers that won't crumble. All day it feels like noon. like rock. Even if I belong to the sky, I'll never ask the ghosts. I know I'll never know why a bloody cloud blooms in the mesa's bone. This is the shortest poem I'll read, and I'd like to dedicate it to Benjamin Nespajami, who is a master of short poems and kind enough to log in today. The video is actually longer than the poem. It's called The Lotus. The lotus drops its petals in the mud. All right, now begins the slightly longer poem portion, but not really that long. I think the longest poem is this one actually, and it's probably going to take me about 3 minutes to read. But I've been trying in my new work to push past the first push past one page. So some of these are trying to do that, and yeah, we'll see how they go. This poem's called Personal Day. There are so many reasons to skip work. For example, you wake up feeling that you are living in a novel. The bedroom windows are yellow with London fog, and the lining of your favorite cape has started to pull. You might call in sick if you wake up to find a researcher inserting her finger into your brain. There's a red button in there, and what if she doesn't find it by breakfast? Or if you wake up to discover that your lover is a mouse, the mouse retches as you try to soothe it in your hand, and that's the existential stance of the day. I might skip work if I see a bobcat in a dream, or if I wake up feeling that I am being watched by 13 hooded crows that are also angels, or if from the seaward side of the bridge I can make out a thunderhead. It's getting larger, and the birds have all gone silent. Or I'll call in sick if I wake up and for once I'm not hungry. My stomach does not grumble. It yelps when you walk by with your half-melted ice cream. What's the use of money or power if neither will charm the Sandman or seduce you into sharing your dessert? You might call in sick if you wake up living in a film set in Paris in 1925. Nightly, you drink too much absinthe and forget which side of the Reeve you live on. You might take a day off if you feel like a river, moving yet confined. To be oneself is a paradox. That's a perfect reason to skip work. Or I might skip work if I wake up in a past life, the one where Kevin is buying solar panels, but his wife is skeptical. She thinks it's a scheme whereby the energy company will eventually own your home. His brother Zach, my best friend from college, has a drinking problem, and for several months we've been trying to plan an intervention, but this solar panel fiasco keeps getting in the way. Instead of going to work, you could go to the museum and contemplate the mummies, contemplate the pigment, contemplate the sandstone. Or instead of going to the office, you could find a valley that sparkles, sit on a rock until the thunderhead gets closer and the wind picks up and the temperature drops and rain slashes through the clouds, then sunlight and a cooling breeze. And still you may not wish to go back to work. There are many more good reasons to skip work. Magnesium depletion, lightning, sewage, eyeshadow. You might find bird watchers in your front yard or that the water has been turned off. Your foot is turning into a sandwich green with pickle relish. Financial markets have gone bananas. A dog thinks you are its bone. The constellations reconfigure themselves. You vomit a heap of microplastics. The trains aren't running. The satellites have crashed into the moon. Your spouse is mining your skull for phosphate. Your straw hat is on fire. You're out of shirts. You're out of socks. You lost your kite. You crashed your bike. You broke your nose. There are so many reasons. It's hard to pick only one. Whatever you choose, live 100% in that world. Own it like a 401k, whether it be a tornado in North Texas or a suit of infested snakeskin. Your name is Nova. It's your beautiful day, and you cannot write another more perfect sentence. Even the sun will believe you. a little walking tour of the Chicago uh, the L, but it's one of the underground stations there. Okay. This poem is called Red Letter Days. It only goes to the bottom of the page, so it's not quite over that limit, but it's still going to take me like 2 minutes to about 1 minute, 115 seconds was what I timed it at yesterday. So we'll see how we do. How's my time going anyways? Okay, I'm good. It begins with a reference to Amazon.com. Red Letter Days. I love it when it's Prime Day and your aura brightens and spreads out, ready to spend money like an orange bird whose wingspan embraces every dust particle in the storm cloud. And I love it when it's Laundry Day and you fold the cloth napkins fast as a robot programmed to stack great towers of linen. The air smells of detergent and the hot fuzz of the dryer balls. And on grocery day, I love how you zip off in your Subaru to stock up on flour and pickles and beans and noodles. And since they're playing your favorite song while you're in the freezer aisle, you buy ice cream. No one loves chocolate peanut butter banana as much as you. And when darkness falls on the Day of the Dead, how you light a candle and eat pumpkin bread to perk yourself up. And I love Hallucination Tuesday, how you walk to work with a wet sponge in your pocket just in case your fever returns. When it's Boxing Day, we all feel a bit crumpled and discarded, like a green ribbon or a napkin your kid used to wipe cranberry sauce from her chin. It's okay to take it easy for a while. Rest up for psilocybin day when you drink herbal tea and eat pizza on the rooftop, hoping to spot Jupiter before you fall through the rafters. Rest up for opening day when I chug too many beers and miss half the game. It doesn't matter if everyone wears blue. The Cubbies always lose. But if you cover your face with an open prayer book, you'll be protected from sunburn. Will you have the enzymes to digest the ghost peppers on Taco Tuesday? Will you have the power to resist a third donut on Ponchki Day? I can't wait until pasta day when we tie each other up with noodles. It's more fun than even tongue day or moon day or pie day when I dust my beard with flour. It's not as disturbing as Spirit Day when the turtle dove glares at me in the alley. It seems hungry for the gummy worms in my pocket. Maybe we should sleep until tomorrow when the festivities have quieted down and we can pick through the leftovers in peace. Anyway, it doesn't have to be a holiday to set off fireworks, just vaguely dark. Here, I have some in my satchel. This poem is called The New Life. Slightly shorter, only 100 seconds. The New Life. Some believe the self is like an ostrich, flightless, fast, lots of neck. Others suspect it is a cosmic explosion or the resultant debris flung to the galaxy's outer rim. Some believe the self is an extension of the tongue, a retractable taste bud that can reach out for miles. Thus, one should keep sugar packets on hand and avoid acid rain. For some, the self is like gravity, an invisible centering point that holds satellites in orbit. For others, it is the residue of a primal expulsion, dust motes settling over the cookbook, gravy turning to jelly, a rubber band resting on a wet rock. I've heard it described as pack ice that flows through a chattering forest of indifferent birds. At times, it might feel like a spasm or a burst of energy. It may howl like a wolf pack or snarl like a bunny. Some suspect the self is like a rush of cold air, and if you're underdressed, you'll run off panting and hysterical until you see the neighbor's animatronic panda staring at you with fire red eyes from their front yard. Maybe that's the shadow self. Maybe that's why we have curtains. Some believe the self is a cactus, while others believe it is the window through which we watch the cactus grow. Some light is trapped in the glass, some light is refracted, and either state describes the self. I too have felt trapped and bent, scrunched as glimmering foil, light as the wobble of jello, a ripple in the pond, the glimmer in a needle, a gash in the eye that knows it's an eye. Okay, we made it. This is the last one. Um, another another 3 minute-ish guy. Let's see. All right, this poem is called First Cause. In one interpretation, it's all your fault. Your dark sneer killed the seedlings. Your tone of voice brought the storm closer. In another interpretation, it's all Dad's fault. His genetics, like exoskeletons that must be shed before entering a state of grace. A third interpretation blames the brother. He ate the last cookie. He buried your pet bunny. He told you a story about soul-sucking fairies that live in the closet. They glow like hot tungsten, and if you fall asleep with the lights on, they'll find you right away. But if you turn the lights off, you'll never see them coming, and they'll carry you to their kingdom of dead leaves and skunk spray, where you'll become a spindle of fog rotating over a lake of murky turtles, which is one version of a state of grace, though you're still bound to the laws of physics. So why not just blame the curvature of space? Blame protons, blame electrons, high energy particles zigzagging inside us like squirrels on a playground. Pretty much no one blames the house wren or the pewee, though the raven draws suspicion. It hides a secret behind its black and white eyes, and didn't it show up first the morning before the storm? Didn't its stare pierce through the kitchen window like an icicle stabbing the snowbank inside you? One could blame indigestion. Maybe it all started with that late night poutine, how it sat in your stomach like a sack of onyx. Would it make sense to blame music? How it's like a socket when you bend over to plug your finger in, how it compels the body to jump into a fire or melt into the couch? We can always blame God, but this requires a belief in God as a puppet master, as a creep behind the curtain, punching buttons, pulling levers, which lacks theological nuance. Might as well blame time itself, mutability, airs and mitosis, the erosion of limestone and topsoil, wind, water, atmospheric pressure. I used to think the problem was something environmental, pollen or mold, flowers that conspire against us, daffodils, hyacinths, tulips. My friend blames the microplastics. They're in our nostrils and in our veins. They're on Mont Blanc and in the Mariana Trench, feeding goblin sharks and zombie worms. And some people blame the endocrine system, whatever that does. Since reality is a biochemical construct, maybe blame should fall on the faulty links between the photoreceptors and the brain. So many hues get lost between the retina and the occipital lobe. One interpretation maintains that the notion of blame is itself the problem, and that we must free ourselves from the cause and effect paradigm, which searches for origins at the expense of seeing what's always around us, like tunneling deeper into a mine to find a jewel when something precious was there next to you all along, the mineral of unprecedented powers, the root that cures a dozen ailments, the beloved friend who stood alongside you while you mumbled about blame and dug a deep hole with your bare hands. Okay,
Nate, that
thank
was great. That was wonderful. I was just adding all the spotlights here. Thank you. Thank you so much. Um,
thanks for having me.
yeah, no, thank you. Thank you, Suzanne and Nate. Um, okay, y'all. So there's time for questions here. I know I've written a couple down. Um, And if anything came about while you all were listening to one another, um, feel free to bring those forward too. Um, one of the questions that I just have for you all as writers, as poets, because I'm always curious about your intuitions, our intuitions, I should say, as poets. Our intuitions are the way we maybe alleviate ourselves a bit, what we rely on outside of ourselves to compose or to edit. And I'm just wondering if, I tell my students sometimes I'll have a lot of books around me, and I like to go into other people's language. I like to just open up books and get into other people's language to help me um, escape some of the way that I might look at things or phrase things. I'm wondering if you all have a method or um, different strategies or techniques that you all use when you're composing or when you're editing to bring other forces into the poem outside of yourself, or if all of the materials just bounce around in your brain on their own. So that's a question I have for you all. I'm just always curious about how you access those points that result in the poems that you create. And whoever wants to go first, feel free. And as always, if my questions are just batty or ridiculous, you can just say pass as well.
No, I think those are good questions and something that I actually have answers to. I do a lot of automatic writing, a lot of free writing early in the morning. I also use form sometimes and then I shatter it. I have a broken, shattered sestina in this book. Um, Anything to keep the monkey mind out of the way so that I can get to the goods. I've learned, what I think I don't know is so much better, than what I know. And I do a lot, I read a lot of philosophy and books and essays and poetry. I'm always feeding the well. I think right now, most of when I'm not a person that writes every single day. Um, but I try to remind myself that I am feeding the well, and then that sometimes that'll strike up. I did a lot of found poem and centos and stuff. I love using other people's vocab. I really do. So I make word banks and stuff like that. Um, I just taught a found poetry class, and all the different ways that we can use other people's language is very interesting to me. Even if it's just to practice, even if it's just to try it on, even if it doesn't result in anything salvageable. That's, I hope that answers your question.
No, absolutely does. Absolutely does. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought your Suzanne, I thought your first poem where you were sort of intoning a little bit of Notley's Descent of Aulette. I love that book. I love Alice Notley. And so I was really into that. But I feel like that's another, that's a kind of some it's not exactly a found poem, but I feel like sometimes when I get really into someone, they almost inhabit me. There's a poem in one of my books that I feel like was written under the spell of Aulette, just kind of like, oh my God, there's this voice that is so it's not mine, but it kind of took over for a while. Um, I don't know. Have you guys ever seen or read that Jack Spicer lecture where he talks about like Martians sending radio signals to the poet?
Frequencies, yeah, tapping into the
Frequencies.
frequencies.
Yeah, yeah, they're out there, right? And you just kind of got to find them. And sometimes it's another poet. But yeah, I use like Jordan. Yeah, I use sometimes I like to use word lists. I'll just have a random list of words and it's like that monkey mind thing Suzanne was talking about, something that just kind of like force your brain to think differently. Um, so all of that's available. Lately, I've been researching a lot, which is really not in my nature, but partly in relationship to my teaching. And so like I've been working on poems and having like 20 tabs open, reading about non-Newtonian substances or whatever, and digesting whatever it is poorly, but somehow letting that trickle into the trickle into the poems.
So another question that I have is when it comes to Suzanne, you had a lot of what felt to be autobiographical poetry. I know there's some motherhood poems that felt, even if quote unquote as a speaker, it just felt very inhabited by in an autobiographical sense or very well seen in that way. Um, but I'm wondering, how whenever I'm writing about something that I know so much about, how do you complicate um, that lived in experience? How do you, and I don't mean to me, I don't, when I say complicate, I don't mean to to have it sound as if you're trying to be, um, like create a puzzle out of it by any means. But how do you maybe find the angles to get back in to also clarify, using complication to clarify what you've lived through? Um,
It's interesting because I've always been uh, what starts out as the poem, whatever the truth is of the lived life, it's often, so far from the truth when it's finished, but it feels like emotionally true to the poem. It's important as a piece of art. I think it was Phil Levine, who said something like, I lie to tell the truth. I do that all the time.
yeah,
So,
yeah, me too. Me too. Yeah.
and there are things, it's interesting that come up. Like one of the reasons, the whole thing with the Hard Times Idaho, I'm not trying to be a downer and I'm fine with this, but my mother passed away during COVID and we were estranged. So I didn't find out for like 18 months because she didn't want anybody to tell me. So it brought up a lot of things, maybe not grief, but it made me think a lot. It brought up things that I thought I put behind me and they showed up in the poem. So in some way things are cathartic, but often um, a lot of what I see or ends up in my poem are things that I see, just images where I'm living, place, or if I'm doing any kind of research-based things. I don't know how I complicate it. I think I probably complicate it because I love language. I love the way it sounds like sonically. It's one of my favorite things. And I always get confused when I read poems that are kind of flat, because I'm like, that is such a tool in your wheelhouse. Why don't you use it? But I know that's a thing. Some people don't want to use sonics in their poems. Um, and I think it's language that I love so much that is probably what complicates it.
No, that makes total sense to me for sure. I I was also thinking with you, Nate, this idea of the impact of metaphors just because of what you're selecting to place next to one another, not necessarily for you having this overreaching metaphor that might be a system that's creating this type of consistency. Do you ever think consciously about metaphors in your work, or is it something that is about proximity of again the language that you bring into it and the images that you bring into the proximity of one another? Um, I don't know. I'm wondering about that.
Well, there are a lot of happy accidents. That's certainly part of my process. Yeah, I mean, I think I think I've tried to avoid uh overthinking uh metaphor or conceits and things like that for a long time, and I feel like I'm old enough that I feel comfortable to like kind of engage with them a little bit more directly now. Um, but even when that's the case, I feel like I need to bend them a little bit or never accept them 100%, right? So even if it's like oobleck or whatever, you know, uh, see where else that can go once you think you have it
One,
figured out.
what I really loved about your poems reading today, and I'm so glad I got to be part of it. I love And this is a question I have for you because I haven't read your previous collections. I'm really excited about this forthcoming one because I want it after hearing you read. Have you, I guess what I'm asking, who are your influences? And have you always like taken the mundane and kind of juxtaposed it with like these kind of surrealist type of situations? You do one of my favorite things that artists do is that you make me laugh and then you break my heart,
Mhm.
and I love that. It's one of my favorite things. So I'm curious. I'm curious about where your voice came from, who are you into? Like who are you reading? I want to read them too now.
Really kind of you. Flattered. Thank you. Um, I mean, I think I've always thought of myself as kind of another another member of a huge tribe of kind of like New York school, very heavily influenced by New York school poets like John Ashbery and Kenneth Koch, obviously, and then surrealism in general. I spent a lot of time as a student, um, as an arrogant student, trying my best to learn and read French and diving into that stuff quite a bit. And I think one of the most influential courses I ever took was a seminar on everyday life, where a lot of theoretical texts about everyday life were kind of juxtaposed with like avant-garde experiments, especially surrealist experiments with everyday life. So that's definitely like, part of the soup, I guess. Yeah.
That's- I loved it. So I'm very excited for your next book.
Yeah.
And
Thank you so much. Yeah, ditto, ditto.
How about you, Suzanne? I know you mentioned Notley with that poem and kind of that moving through almost like the underworld or something. It had this wonderful. Someone said, "What a journey we went on in and I felt that, it's just this kind of mini epic, that we went through. But some of the other work, again, it has this wonderful, the everyday and the things again that people might overlook as not being significant. But I'm wondering, who are the people that really were foundational to you? Um, both when you were starting to admit to the world that you're a poet, which is always a big deal, and then maybe even now.
embarrassing. So embarrassing.
It is, isn't it? I remember doing it Thanksgiving, and it was like the needle skipped on the record.
What?
Yeah.
I think for me, I was very influenced by the images and the objectivists and Robert Creeley, then Black Mountain School in the beginning. And I would write these very tight, little, very like precise poems. My first book is full of them. And it took me a long time to feel, and I think this has to do with being a woman, to feel like I had the authority to do more and say more than of what I thought, my actual ideas rather than to just describe. Bishop was an influence as well, Rethke, those kind, like early in college, but as I've gotten older and felt more, it's so weird. Like, I don't know, nobody said I didn't have the authority, but I didn't, I've been more free. My poems have gotten bigger and longer and richer, I'm in love with like Bridget McKean Kelly. I love the surrealists as well. Baudelaire. I love everything. I have a wide range I love Ashbery and Frank O'Hara and Cobb. So I just kind of like try to, this book has quite a bit of range because of that, uh, in style. Like it's not, how often you see books that are very tightly the same exact kind of style of poem. This, I kind of experimented a lot and it felt very freeing, had a lot of breath. So, yeah, I don't, I try not to write the same book over and over. But you do see themes after a while. You're just like, oh, there it is again.
Right.
So,
No, I can relate to that because I know that I came into poetry with like language poetry and Lynn Hygienia and all of that and Leslie Scalapino and Creeley and those voices never leave. They're still there. And I had my students listen to this really great talk by Kenneth Koch recently where he was like, just read everybody. You'll never lose your style. You'll
no.
you'll never lose that thing within you. You'll just start to accumulate these layers that will allow you to go places. So I think it's great advice. I think early on maybe there's this fear that we're going to be overly influenced, but I found that to be impossible. Okay, we got two questions in the chat. One from Benjamin. And we absolutely have time, Benjamin. So I have a question about the long poem. Suzanne's opening piece was a masterfully done long poem, and Nathan read some really great long poems. So often I practice automatic writing, but then find myself resisting, trimming, saying there might be three tiny poems in there. I can relate to that. How do you both maintain juggling the long poem, and how do you keep yourself going within such an extended form? And this is a great question because I'm teaching a class on a long poem right now, and I'm having students do little prompts to keep them going. But yeah, how do you when you're like, uh-oh, I've gone past that first page or whatever, Nathan, you're talking about. How do you keep yourself going? Or do you say to yourself, you know what, I don't know. I'm an abandoned ship. But let's say, I guess if you don't abandon ship, how do you keep yourself going? That's really the primary question there. How do you keep going?
Well, Benjamin, I had that problem when I first started writing. Be so, I was such an overcutter. I couldn't overwrite. I would just keep sculpting and sculpting. And it was like, lady, put the pen down and step away from the poem type thing. I just couldn't do it. And I think it was because um, I didn't trust that the reader would like I was worried with my hard times in Idaho that I would be able to keep people's attention. It's so hard to get anyone's attention these days to read anything, that everyone's so used to these little sound bites. And I worked really hard to make sure that each sentence was as tight as it would be like a little tiny poem which is harder to write, I got to say. Those precise tiny poems are very difficult to write. But so the other thing I did with Hard Times, and it's broken up a little bit. There's like a little mark here, a little mark here. And then I used some lyrics. I don't know if you noticed the lyric, kind of a little more lyrics. So it's it's narrative. It had different things going. So that helped me keep it further. I showed it to my husband and I was like, I don't know what to do with this. Like the first draft of it, I was like, it's horrible. He read it and he looked at me with such like amazement after he read it that I was like, oh, maybe it's not so bad. He read the whole thing. I was like,
Is that well? We sometimes we just need that one reader. We just need that one reader.
but
That's
yeah, I think you just have to push it. You have to do a lot of overwriting and not be so quick to cut. It's hard once you're used to doing the tiny poem. You want to be precise all the time, but you can be precise like that in a longer poem. So I don't know if that answers your question, Ben. Sorry.
well, that's great. How about you? It's when it comes to the longer poems. What's the longest thing you've ever written, and how'd you keep it going?
Well, I think I have a like 7 page poem, but it's like 7 sections, which is kind of
Mm.
cheating, you know. Um, I don't I don't think I could ever write anything longer than that or like book length or something. I don't know. I think my one test is like how bored am I? If I get bored, then I got a problem. And like, like there was a poem I was thinking of reading today and I was looking at it yesterday and I just got bored with it. And that's when I kind of said like, all right, maybe I need to shuffle things around. And I read a poem. Ben's a Chicago poet, and I read a poem. One of the ones I read tonight, I read it a series Ben runs last summer, and I abandoned ship halfway through the poem, and I just could tell it wasn't right, and I felt bored by it. But I also abandoned ship at a point that I realized would make a good ending to the poem. And
Interesting.
so ultimately, what I ended up doing over the next month was rearranging all the parts and then kind of re, rewriting the in-betweens to make it work. And so I guess that would be another strategy for dealing with long stuff is a lot of times because it's bigger, you have more movable pieces,
Mm.
and it's actually, if it's boring, maybe the pieces are in the wrong are in the wrong spot. So that was kind of an interesting experience for me.
Yeah.
I just
Get up in
I
front
was
of an audience.
something
Yeah.
that helped me get out of the short poem to the long poem. It happened in my last book, and I was writing sonnets. I wrote a sonnet crowns of sonnets, like 12 sonnets, and because they were short, I was still in my wheelhouse, but they connected, right? They were the kind that connect on and on. And that helped a lot, Ben, because it helped you feel like you were in your wheelhouse, but you were telling a bigger story, you know?
Yeah,
Um,
no, I think that's great. I remember one time I used a source text from The Travels of Sir John Mandeville, and I went chapter to chapter, and then I just rewrote those chapters. And so I knew I had something to go to. I knew I had, okay, this chapter to work with and that chapter, and that's what kept me going. Let's end on this question. It's a great question. Uh, from Brooklyn. Is there any other media that you all consume that adds to your creative flow? Anything outside of reading? So maybe that could be, you all were talking about maybe philosophy and things like that. Is there something right now or recently that you could recommend to someone else that they might find to be inspiring, that might lead them back into writing in some way that happened for you?
you want to go first, Nick?
Sure. I don't know. I'm kind of a dork, and like the main thing that makes me want to write poetry is poetry. I love music. I kind of I think like a lot of poets, I came to poetry as a failed songwriter. Um, and so music's like a really important part of just like kind of the energy in my mind when I'm working. But as I've gotten older, I don't write to music. I used to always like want to play music while I was writing, and I've just found it too distracting. I think I just reached the like middle age pivot point where I'm like I can't take it anymore. Um, so yeah, sorry, I don't have a lot of great I mean
No, that's fine. That's
yeah.
fine. Suzanne.
I love visual art.
Okay.
I don't always write I don't always respond to it in writing, but I feel like going to museums and taking in visual art, whether it's traditional or it's, modern or contemporary. I feel like it feeds something inside of me. The other thing I really love, this is very strange. It doesn't make me write, but it makes me feel part of something bigger as an artist, is I love watching documentaries about artists.
Hmm.
Either whether they're musicians or sculptors or photographers, I feel like we all have the same process. And it's so fascinating to me to see that when they're talking about their process, how similar it is, where that magic comes from, where those aliens are, for everyone tapping into the kind of um, that energy, that creative energy that comes out. And how often they talk about how you have to make space for it, you have to show up for it, and that once you're there, your muse or whatever you want to call it, it's like, oh, we're here to work, but they have to know that you're there. Otherwise, they leave you and go somewhere else.
It's true. That's true. Absolutely. They do go somewhere else. They're very finicky in that way, fickle. Well, this was great. I so appreciate you all taking time on a Saturday to come in and to read for us. And for those of you who came today, thank you for being here. I will in the next day or two archive this reading on the Common Sense YouTube page. So please share it with other people. I think it's a reading that other people who couldn't make it today should definitely tune into. Thanks again to Nathan and to Suzanne and everyone else. Have a great Saturday, and yeah, if there's protests going on, please get out to them as well. So
Yeah.
thank you all.
Thank you. Thanks
Thank
for
you.
having me, Jordan.
Take care.
You.
Bye.